Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Finance and Corporate Services Committee on this very busy day, both in council or in committee today, as well as outside. It's a very important day for the decision for the future government of Canada. So I hope everyone's made time to get out and vote. With that, we will get right into things. We will start with the consent items. Could I get a mover for the consent items? Moved by Mayor Verbenovich. Any questions? Actually, we don't have questions on the consent. I do have Councillor Gazzola in the queue. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a question I'd like to ask.
On the consent item?
Yes.
Okay, so that requires a majority of council to bring that out. So I'll take that vote now. Those in favor of bringing this item out of consent? And opposed? Okay, that carries. Councillor Gazzola, your question.
In reading the agreement that we are signing, I could not see any mention in that of the 20-year period.
Through you, Chair Davies, I can tell you if I draw your attention to Section 4A, it actually speaks to the fact that it shall be for a term of 20 years. And I believe it may be in a couple of other spots as well. So it would be on page 1(8) of your report. So if you look for
Okay,
page
that's fine. I couldn't find it. I looked at the original, the other thing that we're passing. The other question I have is that this is for a franchise operation. We're giving them the franchise. Is that right?
It's really pursuant to the legislation that they get the franchise, but we're consenting to it being in this area of the City of Kitchener.
Yeah, well, we have ownership, and we're giving them something. We're allowing them to do something. It's like a McDonald's franchise, only here it's for gas, right? My question is do we receive any compensation for that?
No, we do not.
Okay. My final question is that what period is the 20 years? When does it start? When does it end? Well, if you tell me when it starts, I can figure out when it ends.
Once we go through this process and the Ontario Energy Board actually issues the various documentation that they have to issue, the 20-year period will start as of that time frame. So I'm not sure how long that process will be. I would suspect it'll be over the next couple of months. So it would be sometime in the next couple of months that the clock would start running.
Okay. Thank you. I would like a recorded vote on that item when it's taken.
Very good. Okay, moved by Mayor Verbenovich. Recorded vote has been called. Those in favor? And opposed? And that carries. Okay, we'll now move on to item number 2. That's the REAP Green Solutions funding request. We do have delegations for this, Ms. Patterson and Mr. Blake. Good morning.
Good morning. Chair Davey, Mayor Verbenovich, councillors and city staff and citizens. We're here today to present our annual report in support of our request for annual core funding from the City of Kitchener. And we present our report. It's on a PowerPoint. Oh, okay. We'll carry forward anyway.
Okay. Sorry, was there a PowerPoint presentation expected? Or?
Yes.
Oh, we didn't receive it though, is that? I'm just looking to the clerk.
Deanne said that it was brought forward to the meeting. Okay. Well, you have our annual report in the notes, and we'll describe the photos. We present our report with a very big thanks to the City of Kitchener for the support that you provide for REAP each year. Without your core funding, none of the results you see in the report would be possible because we would not have the core capacity to pursue them. We have 3 messages today, and they're all related to this theme that you see on the front cover of the annual report, building resilience. The first is about REAP's own resilience as an organization. The second is about the return to the community that your investment in REAP brings. And the third is a call to action for all of us on climate change to prepare our community for the extreme weather and higher fuel costs of the future. First, building resilience in REAP. Our request to you is a big part of this. For the past 5 years, the City of Kitchener's contribution to REAP has been $27,500. Our costs have risen. The cost of living has gone up. Our office rent is going up. One significant increase for us is the property tax being paid to the City of Kitchener for the REAP house, which is now about 3 or 4 times what it was, because it's being taxed as a non-residence. After applying for the rebate that charities can receive, we have a net increase of $4,000 annually in property tax. This year, we're asking each of our core funders to increase their contribution a small amount, and our request to the City is for $30,000 in core funding for REAP for 2016. Your contribution gives us the capacity to pursue the charitable side of REAP's work. As you know, we're both an environmental charity and a social enterprise operating with a minimal overhead. We work to make sustainability the norm in Waterloo Region through funded public education and action, with REAP House as the focal point, and through contracts and fee-for-service work, feeding any surplus back into our charitable programs. So an example of the fee-for-service work is the contract we have now with the City of Kitchener to deliver the RAIN program. And we'll tell you more about that in a minute. An example of our charitable work is the REAP House. We get funding when we can, and we also divert revenue from fee-for-service work to keep it going. In short, we need this diversity of ways to bring environmental programs to the city and to build resilience in our organization. And we want to let the city know that we are available. If you have a problem to solve or contracts to award, please consider REAP.
Our second focus today is to share with you how the investment you make in REAP through your core contribution is multiplied many times over in programs and resources that we bring to Kitchener. An example of this is a new service, and you should have a little card, and we may not have brought enough of them, concerning our home energy coach. For the next 6 months, we will offer this home energy coach to pick off where the energy evaluation leaves off and coach homeowners through the process of prioritizing renovations, getting quotes and choosing contractors, and even making a budget to move this work forward. In the new year, we're going to be introducing a financing component, a kind of a revolving fund that our partner Scale Purpose is working and creating. Mindscape Innovations is also part of this multi-stakeholder project. And together, we would want to change the housing stock in Waterloo Region by addressing the barriers to home energy efficiency, including the capital costs. In addition, our coach will be leading monthly workshops at the REAP House on the first Saturday of the month to help to encourage the community to move forward. A natural extension of our work with homeowners has been showing them how to keep their basements dry by managing stormwater on their property. We make the connection to our wetlands, streams in the Grand River, and the importance of keeping these valuable water resources protected. On our next workshop, and you also have a little card about this, Stormproof Your Home will be held at the REAP House on October the 24th. As you know, we've also been working under contract with the cities of Kitchener and Waterloo on the RAIN program, connecting property owners to stormwater credits and explaining how to qualify by taking action on their property, so working with the business segment. Last year, the cities of Kitchener and Waterloo asked us to focus on making businesses aware of the credit program and what they can do to protect groundwater. This slide would be more pertinent if you saw the slide. When I say we're proud of the list of the businesses that are listed on this, but you can see the names on the back of our annual report that have been taking part with some on-site visits and workshops. Many of them weren't aware of the stormwater credits and what they could do to address the water issues on their property. Some of them were for example, were very happy to hear that the salt management program would qualify them for credit on their stormwater bill.
One of the best things about our job is that we get to see the great work being done by participants in our program who make their home or business more energy efficient or stormwater ready. Last year, we celebrated some of those stories with our awards at our Celebrating Community Action event with sponsorship from the city, and you'll find it on pages 8 and 9 of the annual report. We're doing that again this year, and we want to invite you all to join us. It's on November 12th at the Victoria Park Pavilion. We've already sent out invitations, and if we've missed you, please let me know so that we can send one right off. We want to draw our work back now to the City of Kitchener's own goals. Kitchener Council has approved its new corporate strategic plan with 5 priorities for 2015 to 2018. Our programs directly address not only the obvious priority of sustainable environment and infrastructure, but also safe and thriving neighborhoods and strong and resilient economy. In short, the city's investment in REAP's activities brings back far more than the $30,000 worth of impact in the community and aligns with the city's own priorities. We'd like to end with a word about climate change. Our community has joined together to have a common greenhouse gas target and an action plan to approve it. REAP is part of the leadership of that initiative, along with Sustainable Waterloo Region, the City of Kitchener, and our other largest municipalities. We know that municipalities have direct or indirect responsibility for 44% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. We have a lot of work to do. It would have been a good day to show this slide. We want you to know that we're also taking every opportunity to talk to our federal and provincial leaders about the ways they can support climate action through their policies. And we have 3 proposals for national action on our website and that we've been getting out there throughout this federal election campaign. And we take these messages to heart as focus areas for our own work here in Kitchener and ask you, the municipality, to do the same. With your help, we are building resilience in our community, and let's keep looking for ways to support those initiatives that reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And we end, as we began, with a very big thank you to the Kitchener staff that we work with throughout the year and to councillors for the work you do and the support you give. Thanks.
Pardon me. Thank you kindly for your presentation. Questions of the delegations? Councillor Singh.
Thank you both for the presentation. It's enlightening to see the good work that REAP continues to do in the community, and of course improving and making more energy fit for our existing housing stock. That's obviously necessary and important work. What do you do with working with the City of Kitchener, ensuring that we build in stronger guidelines for sustainable development? As part of new development that happens in the suburbs. Apart from high-rise, I'm talking about residential homes. Do you have ongoing work with recommendations that you give and work with our staff, with our building department?
Our focus is primarily existing homes.
Okay.
We find it feels like there's a lot of work on new building. It's a much harder thing to retrofit an existing home, and we focus on that.
Well, I think obviously we would reduce the problem of the new homes that we build so that they don't have to be retrofitted after the fact.
We would be glad to work with the city.
And I hope that city staff will endeavor to work with organizations like yourself in ensuring that we have those controls built into our building requirements. You referred something about the taxes, which kind of caused me some concern. So how much property taxes do you pay for the REAP home?
The REAP house originally was paying about $1,500, and the region was covering that because it's a lease from the region. It was reassessed. I guess MPAC learned that it wasn't being lived in,
right? And
it comes in at a little over $8,000 now, and the region has passed that on to us, and we apply to the city for the property tax rebate, so that cuts it in half. So it's a
so you went from 1,500 to 8,000?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. No way you can rent the basement?
We called MPAC. We called the region. We explored it as much as we could. We're really making a case for the fact that it's still a residence, even though it's not being lived in right now.
So it's being classified as commercial?
Pardon me?
It's being classified as commercial then? Is that what it is? Or?
I guess it is. Yeah. I mean, it didn't seem to have anything to do with zoning or anything else. Simply that there wasn't someone living in it.
That sounds strange. I'll have a question of staff. Perhaps they could
that would be great.
help to clarify a little bit more, because that's a significant increase.
It's huge.
Okay, thank you. So I'll have a question of staff on that.
Okay.
Mayor Vanovich.
Thank you, and thanks to both of you for coming in today. One question I have is, I mean, we've been fortunate in this community to have a group of you doing this work for a while. Do you, how's this work taking place in other cities that you know of? Is it done by the municipality? Is it done by a nonprofit such as yourselves, or how?
Well, I can give you the example of Green Communities, an umbrella organization that we're part of. The whole concept of an environmental center in a community was created by the province under the NDP government, and then and funding was provided. And a number of organizations like ours grew up where there was support in the community, like a board of directors willing to dig in. And then it was canceled when the Conservatives were elected in the province, and some remained and some didn't. And an umbrella organization rose up to kind of be the coordinating body. So there we have counterparts in Thunder Bay, Hamilton, Collingwood, Winnipeg, all around the country. And some of them get all their funding from the municipality, and they deliver all the environmental program for the municipality, like Thunder Bay. Some do not receive any, and many are on an in-between basis, as we are. We are all looking for ways to cover our core costs. That's the biggest challenge. If you don't have significant programming that you can support with admin, it's very difficult to do that.
Okay. And so in terms of that, are there any cases that you're aware of where sort of the municipalities taking on all of this work, or?
Certainly on the climate action side, there are municipalities that lead it. We are unique in having an NGO-led climate action plan with the municipalities. What we've seen is that when municipalities lead it, they are putting money towards implementing the measures within it also. Places I can think of are Guelph, Toronto, Caledon. I believe they all have a climate action plan they created through the municipality and that they're implementing with municipal money.
Right. But a lot more sort of built around this kind of model that we have here, which is community, grassroots-led organizations with support, like
we couldn't find any other
support.
model where it's community-led.
Oh, in particular on the climate change piece.
Yeah.
But in terms of your other work, yes?
Well, some of them are drawing energy efficiency work into the municipality's work. So I see Guelph is moving ahead with local improvement charge financing for home retrofits. Toronto is working on that. Halifax has done a very interesting pilot with solar on people's roofs using LIC financing. On the RAIN side, yes, we're hearing from a lot of municipalities about the RAIN program and what we're doing here. I think they're still figuring out what they're going to do themselves.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I'll have a motion to make.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola?
Thank you. In reviewing the report, I noticed that you've indicated, or staff that have written it, have indicated what they've received from local governments and what they're asking for. What did you receive from senior governments, and what are you asking for from them?
Do you mean the region of Waterloo?
No, I'm looking at the province of Ontario and the federal government. Have you received anything? Are you asking for anything from them?
We don't receive anything for core funding. That was what the province offered when the Green Communities were originally created, and that was eliminated. But we do work very hard to get project funding. So, for example, the Showcasing Water Innovations grant that came to the City of Kitchener and Waterloo that REAP and Green Communities Canada were part of, that was provincial money. We have had, if you look on our financial report on page 14 of our annual report, the top line under revenue is grants, and that includes provincial and federal grants.
I was just trying to equate it or try to find out how much it was. You clearly indicate what you've received from the region, the cities.
If you look on the bottom at the pie chart on page 14, the blue, 22% is provincial funding, And that's not an ongoing basis. That's a project that we happen to receive that year. So that will all go up and down since it's all project-based. Federal funding is barely visible. It's 0.4%. I think that represents Canada student funding.
Did you say 0.4?
Yes.
Yes.
Local funding, that represents our core funding. That's orange. And then the green is fee-for-service, the work that we do on project funds.
Okay. Actually, I had a question on that schedule. You budgeted $256,000 for grants, but you received 20% more. Where did that come from?
I'm trying to think of which grant we might not have known about that came in at that time. Do you remember what it is?
Are there any more of those around for this year?
We are looking so hard for those.
It should be noted that the Home Energy Catalyst program,
That might be it.
it would not have been accounted for in this, but the Home Energy Catalyst program is a federally supported and funded program. So
Yes.
in next year's annual report, you will see a significant larger than 0.4% slice of the pie.
What do you receive from our rural municipalities and also organizations like Union Gas? Do you receive anything from them?
Union Gas does not give core funding. It doesn't give any funding directly to us, but we are a delivery agent for their incentive. They provide an incentive for homeowners for their customers. So that's primarily Cambridge and Waterloo. And we benefit if we can provide the home energy evaluation that shows people what to do in order to qualify for those incentives. The townships, we report to the townships and look for funding when we have a program that particularly affects them. We've had a rural water quality program in the past, well aware, and we worked with the townships on that and received some small funding for it. The last few years, the focus has been more on urban water, so we have not approached them.
Okay, my final question is, I was trying to figure out, I couldn't see from any statements, your year end is March 31st?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, as of March 31st, 2015, were you in a deficit, surplus position, or what? What was the bottom line?
Within the fiscal year, we had a balance that was negative, minus 13,000.
I saw that for the year, but accumulated, what's the story?
Cumulative, we were not in a negative position because we had been able to save from April 2013 to March 2014, the last column that you see, and carry that forward. That was the year when the home assistance program was front-loaded into that calendar year because utilities received double credit for what was accomplished before December 2013. So work that we had hoped might be spread over 2 years was front-loaded into 1 year, and we used revenue from that year in the next year to cover the negative balance.
So you're in a positive position.
Yes, we are.
Can you tell me by how much?
Well, I think it should also be noted from this current fiscal year's perspective, because of decrease of programs and other areas, we're forecasting a deficit for this fiscal year of approaching $100,000 deficit. So at the end of this fiscal year, by the end of March, the vast majority of any of those savings and surpluses will have been used and consumed. As far as the exact number, I don't have that off the top of my head.
So wait a minute, you're confusing me here. You're talking about the fiscal year ending March 31, 2016?
That's correct, yes.
So what has caused you to go $100,000 into the hole?
Primarily due to a significant decrease in fee-for-service work. Grants and grant programs, I'll use the RAIN program as an example. The funding for the RAIN program for this fiscal year is significantly smaller than it was in the past. The home assistance program, because of the front loading of the information or front loading of the work in the past, it was extended for a season, but with very, very minimal uptake in the region. So those are probably the two of the key areas that are impacting our financial situation this year.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I have just a couple questions before we go back to staff. And I think you touched upon it a bit, but again, I noticed on the top line, your grants in 2014, the grant total was near $800,000, and for into 2015, it was $300,000. Is there a single reason? Like, that's a significant drop in terms of funding, where that money disappeared?
Go for here to here.
Okay. Showcasing Water Innovations was a very big $1 million grant over 3 years that ended during that time period. And that, again, none of this is ever ongoing, so it's always going to be rolling up and down, depending on what project funding is available that we're able to access.
Okay, so yeah, so that would be a good chunk of it then, 300. Do you receive any funding from KW Hydro?
From Kitchener-Waterloo Hydro?
Yeah.
Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro. No, we don't.
Kitchener.
Our customers their customers receive $60 off on the cost of an energy evaluation. That's Kitchener Utilities.
That's Kitchener Utilities.
Pardon me.
Kitchener
Yes.
Utilities,
Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro does not provide funding. They do support, Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro does support the Climate Action Plan, the administration of that plan.
Okay.
All three of the electric utilities provide money for that. Did this year, at least. I believe they are not doing that for next year.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola touched upon, you did have excess revenue over expenses of $220,000 at the end of March 2014. Would it be possible, this is all subject to budget at any rate, would it be possible to get a figure for your current bank account standing and your projections for this fiscal year as well?
Yes, so you're looking for our forecast for the end of this fiscal year?
Yes,
Yes.
please. And the current balance, your absolute debt position, if you're debt or positive territory, would be ideal.
Okay.
Okay, that would be great. Believe that covers my questions then. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Galloway-Seelock, questions of the delegation of staff. Okay, thank you very kindly. The rest of the questions are for members of staff, okay?
All right,
Thanks for your presentation. Questions of staff now. Councillor Singh.
Yes, no, it's to do with the property tax assessment. I'm hoping staff can just elaborate a little bit more, and I'm hopeful that there's an avenue that the organization could apply for reassessment with MPAC. If not, more guidance could be given to them.
Mr. Chapman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is the first I've heard of the issue. I'd be pleased to follow up with Mary Jane to get more information, and if appropriate, follow up with MPAC.
Should, and can you please provide that update to council afterwards as well? Whatever the resolution was. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, my question is just with regards to the recommendation here. And it's saying on the last clause about the Environmental Committee's 2016 operating budget. What is their operating budget? How much is it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe their budget is slightly over $28,000. It provides $27,500 for the current grant, and the remaining $500 or so is there for meeting expenses and promotional costs.
So they every year give the same grant out of their operating budget to REAP, is that correct?
That level has been in place since 2011, so that budget has been held constant, yes.
Are there any other advisory committees that have the same level of operating budget that the Environmental Committee does?
Administered by the Clerk's Department, no, I don't believe so, but Mr. May is referencing Safe and Healthy, so he may want to speak further to that one.
Mr. May. Yeah, Safe and Healthy has some, not to that extent.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add, Mr. Chair, other than it does have a budget that it administers. It's created a new grant out of that budget. So there's very little that actually goes to meeting expenses. It's more about programs in the community.
I believe it's about, I think it's $10,000 a year. Okay.
'Cause, 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 when it comes to the environmental committee making these decisions, do they look at other applications as well? I have no problem with the REAP grant, and so I'm not. That's not my concern. I'm just looking at this from an advisory committee that continues to give one grant out, and is that really the best method for us to do this?
Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair, I know that there have been discussions in the past around whether or not this should be transferred into Tier 1 and administered through that same process. To this point, that's not been considered. If memory serves, and it's unfortunate Councillor Fernandez is not here, but other councillors that have served on environment may be able to add commentary. I believe that the Environment Committee also has administered the Community Environmental Improvement Grant Program, but beyond that, I'm not aware that they have any other intake process currently for grants.
Okay. I'm just a little bit concerned on the process, not with the grant itself. So that might be something that we can follow up on and report back, or just give us an update on different advisory committees, and if there's a better way to administer this. If their 28,000 continually goes to REAP, then maybe there's a different process we need to look at. Thanks.
Okay. Mayor Verbenovich, questions of staff? No? Okay. Councillor Gazzola, question? Certainly. Councillor Gazzola, questions of staff? Okay, I'll keep you in the queue then. So no further questions except for my own. My question of staff, and you may not know the answer to this, but is there any reason why Waterloo North Hydro contributes to REAP versus the city, and is there any advantages for us to explore whether KW Hydro should be doing the same, or would it be as simple as that amount coming off of our dividend? Mr. Chapman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and Mary Jane may want to add to it. I believe this is simply historic convention, and when Waterloo has been asked about support, their comment has been that they support through their utility. I'm sure, if we were directed, it's a discussion we could have, but I think you're correct that it would necessarily translate into some conversation about their ability to sustain their current dividend.
Okay. And in terms of, if I'm reading this report or the recommendation correctly, if there is an increase put forward pending the motion that's going to be brought forward by Mayor Verbenovich, but my understanding would be that I can take this as simply the budget for the environmental committee is getting raised, but in the future, nothing's being allocated specifically to REAP in the future. So in other words, next year, if the environmental committee were so inclined, they could pull the entirety of that $30,000 and allocate it elsewhere. Is that correct?
Theoretically, yes, that's correct.
Okay. I think it's important that they have the autonomy to make those decisions. So there are no further questions. Mayor Verbenovich for a motion.
Thank you. And just very briefly, I think to touch on a couple of those things, I think Councillor Kelly Galloway Seelock's comments with respect to the funding, I think it was, as staff indicated, really just sort of through convention in both instances, both in terms of how Waterloo handles it as well as how we handle it historically, that it came through the committee. And as this budget amount was allocated, it just, I can't remember historically because it might have even been before my time, but the money basically went into the environmental budget and was for REAP. There wasn't a actual broader grant process. It was just how the REAP funding historically has been handled. In terms of the motion or the recommendation that's come from Environment Committee to us, I will move that recommendation. I'll do it on a couple of fronts. Number one, because if we look at the funding, the reality is that REAP has been seeing existing levels of funding for the last 5 years. And quite frankly, it's not sustainable to see that continue. I think the request, while it's certainly higher than what we might do with some of our other organizations, is one that is also reasonable, particularly in terms of the importance that we know our citizens place on environmental issues and the work that needs to be done by REAP for the community. I think it's also a much more effective model than one where, as has been outlined in some of the other cities, where the organization relies almost exclusively, if not exclusively, on municipal funding. I think this blended model is certainly a more cost-effective one, and certainly, I believe, cheaper than if we were to offer these services on our own internally. So that would be my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Comments, Councillor Gazzola?
Yes, only a simple comment. I would like to amend the amount to read as $28,000. If I could just speak to that. We're not talking a lot of dollars here, so it's not a big issue, but when you start to look at a 9% increase in their grant, I think it sends a rather bad message to a lot of other people that will be coming to the table shortly. So the reason I asked whether they were in a deficit or a positive position, and it appears that they are in a positive position, and even with a terribly bad financial year this year, they're still able to withstand that. At this time, I think a $28,000 grant, which is more in line with the percentage increase that I imagine we will be offering all of our other organizations. I think at this time that would be sufficient. We can maybe have a different view next year when perhaps they're in an overall deficit position, but not at this time. So.
A recorded vote's been called. Councillor Marsh, comment?
Thank you. I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, there is no other organization locally that can do what REAP does, and we are completely reliant on REAP to administer the work that they do on our behalf. They do it in an efficient manner, and they do it with professionalism that I think is extremely admirable. The precariousness of the nonprofit sector is highlighted in our discussion here when we're talking about, well, should the environmental committee have full decision-making power over whether or not they get their grant next year? And I think that I would really like to support Councillor Galloway-Seelock's concept that maybe we need to reconsider how the money that goes to REAP every year is decided upon, and perhaps Tier 2 or Tier 1 is more appropriate. Speaking of which, every year when we do give those Tier 1 and Tier 2 grants, we do increase it by the cost of living increases, and or CP, whatever the amount is, it's usually 1 or 2%. And if since 2011 the amount has remained constant, then this increase that is 8.5% after 5 years of no increase would be more in line with what it should be if we had done it that way all along. So I am completely in support of the motion on the table and not the amendment. And I'd just like to add what is implied in my comments, a thank you to REAP for all the work that they do. And, and one also, Compass Kitchener, which I was a part of for several years, always saw that the community prioritizes the environment much more than would be reflected in our budget. And so historically, we have received a poor mark at the city on how we're doing in terms of forwarding that priority, and the only reason that we haven't failed completely is because of the work that is done by REAP on our behalf. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galway-Seelock?
Yeah, I just want to be really brief to make sure that my comments are understood. That I support REAP. I support their grant efforts and what they do within the City of Kitchener and really in the region as a whole. That's not my concern. I just want to see this handled potentially differently moving forward. And my concern is not that it comes through the Environmental Committee. I think the Environmental Committee can easily send a recommendation forward to Council to say that they support REAP. That I have no concern with. It's just the operating budget and the if it's going to continually go to REAP, there's probably a better process to do that than saying it's the Environmental Committee's operating budget. So I will support the full amount that's being proposed in the original recommendation of $30,000.
Okay, there are no more comments. I'll comment. I am going to support Councillor Gazzola's amendment. I think it's appropriate in light of the fact that we don't have a complete financial situation at this point. My concern generally is that, you know, for our own internal targeting for our budget for this year, we're targeting 1.5% increases in terms of our tax levy increases and some internal things as well. So Councillor Gazzola's amendment would actually make REAP's increase 1.8%, and I completely commit to saying that this is something we should revisit in the future to make sure that things stay in line. So seeing where REAP is and their financial position in future years, I would definitely want to make sure that we adjust it accordingly in terms of cost increases and cost of living. But I do think that 1.8% is appropriate, at least unless we see some numbers that show that REAP isn't in the black at the end of this fiscal year. I would also point out that the municipalities and the region are definitely pulling our weight here, and I think, you know, we really need to, REAP really needs to, and we can probably add our voices to lobbying other orders of government to help in the funding here, because when you have swings of $800,000 in grants one year and then $300,000 the following year, that's what really creates the issue, the instability there. So I think we need to do some more work in helping lobby on their behalf, but I will support the 1.8% amendment as put forward by Councillor Gazzola. Mayor Rabinovich, final comment?
Just if I can very briefly make one final comment as the mover, and that's, you know, I respect that there's a variety of opinions around the table, but I think the one thing that concerns me is this notion that because they have a reserve, which every well-managed not-for-profit should have. In fact, you know, the recommended amount typically is around 6 months. Just because they have a reserve is actually a responsible, prudent thing for them to do in order to manage some of these kinds of fluctuations that have been talked about. And I would hope we don't get to the point where we need to see reserves depleted before we're willing to consider more substantive kinds of increases, which are still very reasonable in light of the fact that there hasn't been an increase in 5 years, that we're going to simply force people to get to the point of not having those reserves in order to see additional support come their way.
Okay, thank you. So recorded vote has been called. We'll take Councillor Gazzola's amendment first. Voting is open. Those in favor? And opposed? Okay, the amendment fails, so we'll go back to the main motion as written. Recorded vote. Those in favor? And opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the Arts Sustainability Funding Review. Item number 3. And, sorry, will staff be doing any sort of presentation before we take delegations, or we take the delegations first? Mr. Wilmer?
No presentation, just delegations first, and
Delegations
then staff
first.
are here to answer questions if there are any.
Very good, thank you. So with that, we will begin with Mr. David Marskell from the museum.
It's being suggested that I let KWAG go first, if that's okay.
Whatever works, certainly.
Okay. Okay.
Oh. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, and councillors, my name is Bryce Craker. I'm a corporate lawyer at Gowlings who, over the course of the past 6 years, has developed a love and a passion for the visual arts and for the work of the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery. I now serve as its volunteer president of the board of directors. 59 years ago, a group of visionary leaders from the business, education, and arts community came together with aspirations of forming a public art gallery that would represent our region and be recognized on the national stage. A world-class city deserves a world-class public art gallery. And just like a thriving technology and innovation economy requires anchor organizations like BlackBerry, OpenText, and Christie Digital, a thriving creative community, which we know to be key to supporting a digital economy, requires anchor cultural institutions like the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, the Clay and Glass Museum, the museum, and the Grand Philharmonic Choir. Our pillar organizations in the cultural sector, while surviving, however, are not necessarily thriving, and this impacts the entire creative community ecosystem. As a public art gallery, and by virtue of the federal and provincial funding that it receives, the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery is constrained in what it can do. It is not a museum in the traditional sense, and thus is not eligible for funding from the region of Waterloo. It is a public art gallery that qualifies for funding from the Canada Council for the Arts and the Ontario Arts Council, which provides 16% of the gallery's revenue. The funding decisions of these councils are independent of government and based solely on our ranking as compared to peer galleries across Canada and the province. We are consistently ranked in the top 25% of galleries across Canada, and this ranking, which secures our provincial and federal funding, is only achieved by our ability to meet specific criteria and fulfill the mandate that are set out for public galleries. And this mandate includes, firstly, focusing on the professional and original curation and exhibition of contemporary visual arts. Secondly, growing and conserving a permanent art collection. 3, engaging in curatorial research and publications. And fourthly, delivering public arts programming, education, and workshops. Within our existing budget, we curate 90% of our exhibitions in-house, many of which travel to other galleries across Canada. We manage a collection of over 4,000 pieces of art, which, by the way, the movable cultural property branch of the federal government deems to be a significant national resource. We publish beautiful catalogs containing originally researched curatorial essays, and we offer almost daily programming to the community by way of lectures and workshops. Over 7,000 children participate in our school and summer programming annually. We have programming for seniors as well as for those suffering from Alzheimer's and their caregivers. We provide training to medical resident doctors to assist them in observation and bedside manner. To access increased federal and provincial operational funding, the governments will first need to increase their funding to the Canada and Ontario Arts Councils. Secondly, for the Art Gallery of Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery to receive a greater portion of that funding from these councils, it needs to continue to meet the high professional standards and the objectives that are required of a public art gallery. Every year, however, our budget allows us to do slightly less, which potentially jeopardizes our federal and provincial funding from the councils. While the City of Kitchener provides 25% of our revenue, 1/3 of this gets paid directly to Centre in the Square for rent and building maintenance. The problem, as I have described it, and as I have come to learn of it in my new role as the chair of the board, comes down to what I call the last $200,000. A disproportionate amount of staff time is expended on finding the last $200,000 in order to meet the budget. But if we could find that last $200,000 and know that it is secure, we could further expand and fulfill the gallery's mandate as required by the Canada and Ontario Arts Councils, and then potentially leverage that $200,000 into greater federal and provincial funding, while at the same time attacking the deficit, which is forefront in our minds. We want to thank the City of Kitchener for its support and for the sustainability funding received since the implementation of the per capita Arts Sustainability Fund model. We are also very pleased with the report that is being tabled today and commend Ms. Birdsell and everyone else involved on the hard work that went into this study. The report will provide a solid basis upon which to streamline municipal funding of the key cultural organizations, and it will enhance the transparency and accountability surrounding this precious commodity investment. If we were going to make one note on the report, however, we would point out that in tables 9 and 10, the comparator galleries that have been used in the reports all have budgets that are significantly larger than that of the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery. From this data, the report concludes that local municipal funding is above average with the municipal funding that other galleries receive. And as previously noted, that municipal funding, about 1/4 of it goes directly to Centre in the Square. The comparator group includes many of the largest galleries in Canada: Alberta, Nova Scotia, Winnipeg, Vancouver, which, by the way, just announced a $350 million expansion. Based on our analysis completed 2 years ago, where we looked at galleries that we believe to be more similarly situated to the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, both in terms of size and budget, we would respectfully submit that the gallery is municipally underfunded, both in terms of actual dollars and the percentage of budget. We merely point this out for consideration as the appropriate level of funding for the gallery is assessed in the future. We are very grateful for the funding that we do receive, and as we celebrate next year our 60th anniversary, I'm pleased to advise that at a national level, the art gallery is highly regarded and punches well above its weight, and the visions of its founders continues to be achieved. My only question is, how will we sustain and grow this vision for the next 60 years? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the delegation? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your presentation. So, Mr. Marskell, are you prepared to go second? Very good.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. And I'd like to introduce Linda Fabi from our board of directors, and Diana and Stephanie, a couple of my colleagues. So thank you very much. I'll go through this as quickly as I can. Our year ended June 30th, and during that fiscal, we attracted almost 90,000 people to come downtown to Kitchener, which is terrific. Our programming for that year included Unwrapping Egypt, our partners from Egypt. We created Getting Naked with some outside help to curate it, and created a lot of media stir across the country, and had some great installations during the summer for families and children. And I appreciate the 5 or 6 of you who came through the museum this summer. We've partnered with many groups, and that's an important part of what we do, to be a stage for local groups. We recently had the Fast Forward Waterloo Region collective show, which was artists from the community. We currently have Light Illuminated, which is working with the University of Waterloo and the Optical Society, and there's many other examples. The brush off, which we've started, is now expanded into Cambridge and to Waterloo, which is also great. Christie Digital was very helpful in supporting us last year and allowing us to create the Christie Entertainment Series, which brought thousands of young professionals downtown, or kept them downtown after work, and students from the University of Waterloo. We have a number of corporate sponsors, which is great, including Union Gas, who just last week gave us a substantive check as a sponsorship for our Kids Inspiring Change program. Our students have grown. We had over 40% increase in growth last year with our students. We have 7 teachers on staff, which is terrific. We're keeping an eye on the negotiations right now with teachers, but we feel that we'll have another good year. There's been a number of themes that we've worked on to make sure that we are relevant to the teachers and to the students. Another aspect that's very important to us is the accessibility for the community. Many people, over 8,000 people, took advantage of our $5 Wednesdays, which all day long is only $5 up to 9 o'clock. The Sun Life Accessibility Program, over 8,000 people got in for free there. We have Grandparents' Days for them to get in free. And we received $30,000 to upgrade our Tot Spot area, which is great for a number of different visitors, including those children with autism. We keep Waterloo Region and Kitchener on a national level. Our recent shows were covered by Maclean's Magazine, the Globe and Mail, Huffington Post, CBCQ nationally, and CBC News nationally. We also keep Kitchener, downtown Kitchener, on a world-class stage. The picture on the left there is photoshopped, but the installation is now in place, and I urge you to come and see it. It's a 20-year installation. We also had the monks come in, Tibetan monks come in at the end of August to create the sand mandala, which was over a course of a week, and then they destroyed it at the end. It was a very powerful piece of work. We are optimistic going forward. We had a good year coming that just concluded. We do, in this coming year, have many concerns with the perception of getting to downtown Kitchener with the LRT. With the restricted fund markets, that is our lifeline. We live off the interest of a restricted fund, and that reserve has dropped about 15%, which gives us about 7 or 8 years of life based on it. And this review of the per capita funding. Going forward, we have the Havana Dialogues, which will feature the Cuban ambassador, President Castro's daughter, and a number of other speakers and films and so on. Light Illuminated, which I mentioned, and we'll be announcing details of the Aging Dialogues and the Terry Fox exhibition coming up. The report, like others, I applaud Angela's patience and detailed work. There are flaws, and there's certainly what others say that we should receive as organizations, and what is being suggested here is reverse. Other people talk about, sorry, let me say that in a positive way. The museum receives about less than 27% of our funding from municipalities and have to generate over 70% each year. And that's kind of reverse of what's actually happening. Angela said something very flattering to us, that she couldn't find a comparative across the country, and then she chose to compare us to a children's museum that receives federal funding. We're not eligible for federal funding, and to science centers, which also receive various amounts of funding that we're not eligible to receive. Sorry, this slide is always out of order for me here. The chart is somewhat misleading, and I really need to highlight this. It suggests that we received in the year that was studied 41%. We, on an average, receive much less than that, about 25%. The year that she is chosen, there was some special project funding from the region of, specifically from the region, but we get an average of about 25% based over 5 years. Our board has a succession plan responding to the report, both for staff and for the board themselves. And we work off these 5 strategies that the board has been honing for the last couple of years. I assume you can print this off and look at these in detail. I'm conscious of my time limit here. So those strategies are very important to us and things that we are working on. We also are working with a research-based growth with a web panel that we have approaching 600 people involved with now so that we can better predict the outcome of our exhibits. We are matching the City of Kitchener's economic development strategies with our new makerspace, the underground makerspace that will be created and open for next fall. And as many of you know, we have just reopened our storefront with the folks at the Cambridge Hotels and Conference Centers with Be at the Museum. So kind of in summary, we have about 90,000 people coming to downtown Kitchener, about roughly 20,000 people from Kitchener, but a very important note is 45% of people from outside of the region. That is part of our quest to become a cultural hub for southwestern Ontario, one of the strategies that I went by quickly there. And we have certainly put Kitchener in the region on a much larger cultural map. As I said, I applaud Angela's work, and I applaud the municipalities for undertaking the study. I think it was very important that you hear from somebody from the outside. And just like to point out that the funding from the per capita fund has not increased, nor has it reflected the per capita growth of our population. The bottom line is we are underfunded, and unlike other key cultural organizations, we are not eligible for the provincial and federal funding, and that really is the issue. Our earned revenue was up 18+% last year. Our staffing is down a couple of $100,000 over the last 2 or 3 years. Our exhibit line is down in terms of expense. We're doing what we can to manage properly, and I think we're doing good things for downtown Kitchener. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are going a little bit over time in our presentations, but we did have an item dropped, so we have some extra time today. Questions to the delegation, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, it just, you came to the end. I had thought of my question. Just, I wanted to dive down and see if you really supported. Obviously, you see some flaws in the report, but you support the recommendations that are coming forward. Is that correct?
I think the general recommendations of how we report back and so on, yes. I mean, it's interesting. What's being asked of you in terms of funding is, should you continue to fund us? I would hope the answer is yes. And there's been no catch-up in terms of inflation and so on. So there are issues in the report, and some of the comparatives, as you heard before me, and in our case, there was some flaws in it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think, and staff may be able to, and not to debate with you, but I think there was an increase in the per capita fund, but it just didn't end up flowing to the organizations. It became the extra that we had for the small, medium organizations, but that's not really the point. I guess my one question to you is, I didn't realize, and maybe I just missed it in previous presentations, that you weren't able to apply for federal or provincial funding because you're not a children's museum or a science center. Is that what I heard you say?
There's different reasons. The biggest one is that we do not have a permanent collection. It's a square hole in a round peg, and we've been working with the province, we've been working with the federal government for them to try to better understand how they can help us. We're certainly on their radar. From time to time, we get project funding. The hotspot I mentioned, we had $30,000 from the federal government, and from time to time from the provincial government, but we're not eligible for operating funds.
Mm-hmm. So, did you used to get funding when you were known as the Children's Museum?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, we got project funding, but not operating funding.
Right. Okay. That's probably a discussion for a different day anyways, but thank you.
Thank you, and there are no further questions. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Marscal. And lastly, we have Mr. Bennett from the Symphony.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, Committee, I suppose, technically. One of the questions that prompted this report was, did sustainability funding make arts organisations sustainable? And the report clearly answers that question with a rather resounding, thudding no. I just wanted to talk about that a little because the precept, as set out in the report, is quite clear. The idea of the per capita funding was to lever very significant additional funds that would contribute of the order of a total of $3 million a year to the arts and culture sector. That wasn't achieved. The historic reasons why it wasn't achieved are not really interesting at this moment, but it's important to realise that the ambition of the sustainability process wasn't achieved, and that's why it's been possible to inject a significant amount of money, for which all the arts organisations are extremely grateful, and yet not achieve precisely the sustainability that was sought. And it would be reasonable for all the municipal funders to ask the question, did it make a difference? And the answer to that is an equally resounding yes. I'd like to share with you just a few examples of work that the Symphony has been doing in the last few weeks and months. Exactly the kind of thing that's possible because of the small but significant additional funding from this city and from other municipalities. We have 14,000 school children attending our schools' concerts. That's not counting the other school children who are involved in all sorts of other ways. They are being exposed for the first time to the quality of orchestral music which we have in this city, and the degree of interaction which is possible through that very specialised work. 2 weeks ago, I was in the women's prison down near Doon Village with the orchestra performing in that space. It started with the orchestra at one end, then staff, and then prisoners. In what was a terribly emotional moment, it became clear that we were one room and not a separate room. That's the power of music in that kind of environment, to really make a difference and to transform lives. Similarly, when the Symphony goes into Winston Park Retirement Complex and works with seniors, some of whom have Alzheimer's or early onset Alzheimer's, we're able to work with those people and make a big difference to their lives. Of course, the core of our work is a series of concerts, not just at Centre in the Square, but elsewhere, which attract 80,000 attenders annually. But even then, the work we're doing is enhanced and made more special through activities such as the invitation to the Subi Dance and Drum Troupe. I was there just over a week ago with a group of young people just arrived from Uganda, not just able to be on the stage at Centre in the Square for the first time in their lives working with a symphony orchestra, but also having the degree of interaction with individual players, with members of the audience, that made it an extraordinary occasion. And earlier at the start of this season, the end of last month, you'll have heard about Hack the Orchestra, the first ever hackathon with a symphony orchestra in the world. Well, we've showed some of the results of that work. The young programmers were somewhat overcome by the interest of an audience in the work they were undertaking on stage, and every night that the fractal geometry experts were presenting a visual, the audience got more and more excited by seeing what was coming next. All of that is possible because we're able to just about manage to do that. The report, which I similarly commend to you, does not untangle the arts funding structure in this region. That possibly is a request too far. It's a very complex thing. But it does make sense all of a sudden of a process. The Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony, if memory serves, I think makes 7 applications per year for municipal funding in the region. With all due respect to council, to the staff, and indeed to my own colleagues, it's not a very satisfactory process because I don't think we put the energy into that application, and I don't think the scrutiny is as good as we deserve and you would expect. This process, which is put to you of a streamlining of the application, assessment, and evaluation process for arts funding, makes an awful lot of sense. Finally, I would mention that I've proposed to staff, and although I don't speak on behalf of all the other arts organisations, there seems to be an agreement that it's something to pursue, that if we are saving the amount of staff time and assessment time and so on and so forth through the proposals, that all the arts organisations make a special proposal or special report alongside that, which talks about delivery across the community. Although members of this council are incredibly diligent in trying to attend everything and see everything and watch everything that we do, it isn't possible given the range of work we're doing. And I think we should be drawing to your attention the fact that we're in the women's prison, Winston Park, and so on and so forth, much more accurately on behalf of all the municipal funders, so that you can join us in taking great pride in that work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Questions? Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I just had one because I found some of what you said very interesting. You talked about how it's not sustainable because we didn't get or meet our other goals of leveraging the funding that was required. Would you say, in your opinion, that the local governments did what we were supposed to through that, and that we just the leveraging never materialized? Would that be accurate?
There's absolutely no question that all the municipal councils stepped up to the plate. The only quibble one might have, and I again do not wish to appear less than grateful for that funding, is that although it started off as a per capita rate, that didn't rise as the population grew, albeit only a small amount over 5 or 6 years, and in some cases, nor did it keep pace with inflation. I'm not saying the city of Kitchener was in that boat.
Right, so when you say that, you mean that your grant specifically didn't rise with the population increase and the rate of inflation? Because I think the overall grant did itself. Absolutely. It just didn't end up materializing to your organization, to the pillar organizations. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. No further questions. Okay, so that concludes the delegations. So the floor is now open to questions of staff. Councillor Gazzola.
Jeez, that was fast. Yeah, I'm trying to understand all of this, and I'd like if staff could help me. When this first came, we talked about the 1% factor, and from what I'm understanding now, that's being thrown out, and as a result of this report, we're saying that these organizations should just be receiving these amounts and not have to come back for special grants every year. But can someone from staff explain to me that 1%?
To clarify, Councillor Gazzola, you mean not 1%, but dollar per capita, like $1 per capita?
What was the? I thought it was a 1% dollar.
No, it was dollar per capita. Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, that's correct. It's $1 per capita of additional funding, incremental funding.
Of additional, so that was, and our per capita was 250,000 people. Is that it? So
when the program started, our population was roughly 220,000. Now it's roughly 244,000 projected for next year.
And that's what we're putting in. So and if we do that, then we are at the level we should be at. Was that the?
Through the chair, no, I wouldn't say so. I think that as some of the delegations referred to earlier, there was a $3 million per year gap identified. And the solution that was proposed was if the municipalities would contribute an additional $1 million per year, and that would leverage an additional $1 million from senior levels of government and an additional $1 million from the private sector, that would close the gap.
Okay, good. That refreshes me. So the municipalities have put forward their $1 million.
That's correct.
Except for a little bit short on per capita. But can someone explain the other two partners to this? What have they done? How close, and this has been in play for 6 years, how close have they come to their $1 million?
I don't have specific answers to that. I don't know whether Ms. DiDonato has through her work, but certainly I think the conclusion of the report that was done was that the municipalities additional contributions of roughly $1 million a year did not leverage that additional funding from senior levels of government or for the private sector. Now, the private sector certainly did step up and is contributing more to the sector, but not to the tune of $1 million a year.
And the senior government's obviously not. Okay, just one final. Who commissioned this study that's talked about here?
Through the chair, this was jointly commissioned through the City of Waterloo, the Region of Waterloo, and the City of Kitchener.
And the cost of the study was?
I would look to Sylvia.
Ms. DiDonato?
Through the chair, the cost of the study amounted to approximately $14,000 for each of the 3 partners.
And there were 3 partners? Is that 3 partners?
Through the chair, yes, the Region of Waterloo, the City of Waterloo, and the City of Kitchener.
Cambridge is nowhere near involved, or the rural municipalities? They're not involved in this?
Through the chair, they opted not to participate in this process, though Cambridge and I think also the rural municipalities will be considered and potentially participating. I think there's an interest in participating in the collaborative process moving forward.
They've said that for 6 years, right? Thank you.
Councillor Gallery-Seelock?
Yeah, I just want to drill down a little bit more on that per capita. Having kind of been involved since the onset and having been able to go to some of those initial meetings to kind of understand the vision, and I can appreciate that CEI is refreshing their mandate, and I think that all is really what's going to drive the rest of this moving forward, and not having that piece today I think makes some of this a little difficult. But part of the, I guess when it comes to the 1% per capita, we've heard that the goal was then to leverage other funds. If we don't continue along that line, do we lose our message when we go to the private sector or to other levels of governments? Do we lose our messaging around that if it's presented differently, or if we don't continue with some of this funding?
Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, I would say that we need to make sure that we don't lose the messaging. Certainly, I think one way to do that would be to show our commitment by continuing the additional funding that we have been doing over the last 5 years. But I think in partnership with that, as you suggest, we risk losing the message if we don't make every effort to keep that message going, that this needs to be a multi-stakeholder partnership. It needs to include senior levels of government as well as the private sector.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear from my perspective. Is there any time sensitivity around this recommendation, understanding that, of course, the organizations would love to see this move forward immediately? My concern is that while it's different potentially from CEI, it appears as though we're going to get that update in November at the all-council meeting. Is there any reason why we can hold off on this until we kind of understand how that piece fits into this equation?
Through the chair, and Sylvia may wish to elaborate on this, I don't think there's time sensitivity in terms of making a decision this week or next week relative to the joint meeting of municipal councils in mid-November. But I think that as of the 2016 budget, it would be helpful to everybody involved to be clear on our commitment to funding and on any changes to the process.
So just having listened to that and maybe not completely comprehending what you just said, is there any ability to make sure that we still deal with it before the end of the year, in that late November time frame, so that it's still definitely within our budget that we can do? I actually have no problem probably with approving it today. I'm just wondering if for the holistic picture it makes more sense.
Through the chair, certainly the intent of the way these recommendations are written is so that councils can deal with them now, and that any references to CEI are really acknowledging that is still a work in progress and will be better informed by the November 13th joint meeting of councils.
Okay, I appreciate that answer as well. I'd be prepared to move the recommendations at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Just before we go any further, I think it's worth pointing out that clause number 2 of the recommendation, there is an option there. So I mean, if you're moving the recommendation, I'm assuming the way that I'm reading it, that the $44,000 is really, that's the unaccounted for portion of this. So I'm assuming that the recommendation says that $44,000 is allocated to Tier 2 grant process. Is that so? Councillor Galway, I can get clarification on that.
Yeah, sure. I would probably ask that it just be held in reserve at this time and not make a decision until we have that piece about the CEI, and we can make that decision at a later date.
Very good.
If that's okay.
Okay. Mayor Vabenovich?
Well, I was actually just going to speak to the motion. I can certainly support the the motion that's before us. I think when it comes back to council, it would also be helpful just to get an update of what our other partners are doing or where they're at in terms of their approval process, if there are any updates in terms of the region and the city of Waterloo. And I concur with Councillor Galloway-Seelock in terms of I think the CI piece should be held until we hear from them, and then we can make that decision at that point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh?
Just a question of staff. After reading the executive summary of the report by Birdsall, I'm still left wondering why we have the first recommendation, 1A, that the per capita and arts sustainability funding nomenclature be retired. Can you help expand on why that's a good idea?
Ms. DiDonato?
Through the chair, the region of Waterloo had absorbed, for example, the arts sustainability funding into their cultural funding, and the city of Waterloo and the city of Kitchener kept it separate. And what we felt in the analysis provided by Ms. Birdsall is that it will allow for more transparency and increased accountability if council could see the full amounts within a recognizable program that each city has. In the case of Kitchener, each is a member of the Tier 1 layer of arts and culture funding. That seemed to be an efficient way to accommodate the needs of council for transparency, and also to make it easier for the cultural groups to know exactly what the process would be.
Okay, but if the hope is to be able to still yet move to leverage those dollars in a large pocket from the joint amount from the area municipalities in the region, wouldn't it be in our interest to be able to say, look, higher levels of government, we are putting in this amount, this $1 million, and so be able to do that in a more coordinated way?
Through the chair, it's not completely clear that we can leverage upper level government funding and private sector funding specifically by having the separate fund. There may be other motivations, but the fact that the sustainability fund raises a level of what we might call stability for the organizations, it does mean that opportunities to access those funds may be more easily available to those groups because of the stability or sustainability, maybe not specifically because we can point to that amount. And I may be corrected on that if anyone has thoughts further from Mr. Wilmer.
So I would agree with that I think that by building it into the operating budget and its base budget, we can and will say that we have increased our funding. It's now part of our operating budget, and so it's now a sustaining increase. So I don't think we need to lose the messaging just because it's not a separate line item.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Etherington?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments. I'm referring to number 2 and number 3 of the recommendation, and I disagree that that 44,000 should be held in reserve in the way that it's been suggested. And that, in my opinion, is based on the questionable creative enterprise record. I'm unwilling to continue support for CEI into the future, with or without the, quote, refreshed mandate. Quite honestly, I'm unwilling to shovel more taxpayer dollars into that black hole. So I'm going to ask that we have a separate and recorded vote on number 2 and 3. And my reason for that, again, and I've said this in the past, I think CI has created divisive confusion out there, and I think it's time to quietly put that whole scenario to rest. CI should be retired, and we should continue from there. So I would ask that recorded vote on numbers 2 and 3 of that recommendation.
Not a problem, thank you. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Just comments. I do anticipate the CEI mandate. I really want to see the refresh on that. I share some of the concerns that Councillor Etherington has brought up. I also have concerns about duplication of services and funding that's going to administration that could be better used going directly to our arts community. I support this because I really feel our cultural institutions have returned greatly in value for our investment in them in terms of experience and just the enrichment of lives in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm in a quandary here. I'm not sure what to do. For 6 years now, I have not supported this, not because it's not right. I'm going back to square one. The concept of putting more money into arts and culture, I totally support it. I support it to this day. It's an important thing. It's something that we have to do. My concern right from day one was that we put monies in, and the bulk of those monies went to 3 organizations. I thought when this discussion was started that we were going to start to look at things differently. I thought that eventually it might even come out that there would be an organization that would look after this sort of thing and treat everyone fairly, and governments would just feed money into that organization who would look after doling the money out. That has never happened. The only thing that ever came of it was we gave 3 organizations, and they're all tremendous organizations. I can totally support them, but everything went to those 3, and then we have nothing going to anyone else. And we had organizations like Neruda coming back asking for $3,000 or $4,000. A lot of small organizations and coming back hat in hand, and we never had money for them. So I'm really not sure where to go on this. I can appreciate that these core groups need this money, and they need it as part of their base funding, and it probably should be growing every year according to per capita or even the cost of living. But I'm not sure that we're going to answer these questions. When we started out with this, there was a discussion of all of us in the region. Are we each of the municipalities doing our fair share when we take into account all of the arts organizations in the region? And the Center and the Square is a large arts organization that isn't even considered in here. In a lot of ways, our Memorial Auditorium, I think, serves in the capacity, and these things have never been accounted for. So I guess at this point I can I can support the fact that that we need to make this fund sustainable for these core organizations, although I would still like to see how we share this across the region. But as far as the other monies that we're setting aside, I've never seen, or I think in 1 year I saw a little bit of it dribbling out to some minor organizations, but that's it. Over a 6-year period, it's done nothing for the little organizations that are struggling, or the new ones that are trying to get started. So I would not support items 2 and 3. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may, I feel I need to respond when words like "nothing has been done" or "it's done nothing for small organizations," because in my opinion, that's not true. I want to make the distinction between operating funding that the city has given to CEI, recognizing that we're not here to talk about CEI today. That's for another day. But we have historically given both operating grant to CEI and this allocation of in 2015, $39,000 to CEI for it to invest in small and emerging organizations. So we have invested into small, emerging, mid-career organizations through CEI. And so those organizations are receiving the benefit of our arts and culture sustainability funding.
Thank you. And point of order, Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I don't know if it's specifically a point of order, but we should have all received the email from Debbie Curry, which clearly outlines a bunch of the things that grant money went towards. So I don't know if you want me to read just a couple, but it includes the KW Comedy Festival, Pat the Dog Theatre, Grand River Film Festival, Koi, Blues Fest. There's a bunch more in there. It included grant writing assistance. It included promotion and event calendars for various things, facilitating chamber memberships and workshops for individual artists. So there, if you read the email, it talks about a bunch of organizations. So I just wanted to add that just for clarification.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair Davey. I guess I do have a kind of a question to staff, and it's regarding the 44,000 for item number 2. Sorry, I have a cold. I'm not feeling too well either. But anyways, my question is with the 44,000, if we were to move ahead with the 44,000 and allocate that towards Tier 2, how would that affect the Creative Enterprises refresh mandate if they were to move forward? Because I don't know what their timelines are or anything like that, because I would hate to sit $44,000 where we have small cultural organizations that could use this money today, and without knowing what their mandate is and giving them money on the side, I don't feel comfortable with that until I know where they're at. So I mean, it could be 6 months from now, it could be whatever. We don't know where it's going to be, where it's going to lead. So I want to know where that's. If you can give us some clarification on that.
So part of the question would be, if it was allocated to Tier 2, how long would it be before those dollars were dispensed?
Well, and I want to know for CEI, because if it's a refresh mandate, I don't want to allocate money, and maybe I don't like the refresh mandate.
Right, and that's coming in the next all council. It's coming in November. So I look to staff.
So I would echo that the intent is that on November 13th, all of the councils will understand what CEI's refreshed mandate is to be.
Okay, but is their refresh mandate going to be start operating right away, or is it going to take time?
Through the chair, I think that really depends on how the councils respond to it. I think CEI's intent is that it take place right away.
Okay, I'm going to have to think about this number 2 when it comes up, because I would rather just see that 44,000 go into the Tier 2 grants and help the struggling organizations, and then when the time comes, find additional funding, whether it for the refresh mandate.
Before I go around again, just quick question. My concern going into this, reading this report and the appended report as well, like I understand why we're retiring the per capita, because I think it's disingenuous, because there's that thing out there about $1 per capita when we're somewhere much higher than that. But therein lies my question. Is there any way that we can get an idea of how the City of Kitchener invests in arts and culture totally per capita compared to other municipalities in Ontario or Canada?
Through the chair, it's a partial yes. Certainly we can report on our investment. The risk in comparing ourselves to other municipalities is that, as I think we all know, people report things differently and measure things differently, so there may be some risk that it's not an apples to apples comparison. But certainly we can report on our arts and culture investment and make our best efforts to develop some comparators.
Okay, because my concern is that like clause 4, that that the funding be looked at. My concern is that it comes back to us, that the municipality needs to, and this is not certain by any extent, but the municipality needs to increase its funding. We heard from the organizations here today that obviously they're underfunded. They would like more dollars as well. And it may very well be that we do need to increase our funding. But my problem as a deciding member of this council is I don't know how we fit in terms of our contribution. So I'm going to need some direction when this goes forward. For example, I'm quite comfortable, and I've said it in the past, that I'd like to see Kitchener be leading in Ontario in terms of the amount of money we spend per capita on arts and culture. But right now, I have no idea. Are we at the top of the curve? Are we at the bottom? And how can we sort of hone that in and then try and figure out where the dollars go after that total budget figure has been set?
So through the chair, I would again say that we will make our best efforts to try to find some appropriate benchmarks so that we not only understand what our own funding is, but how that compares across the country.
Okay. Going around, Mayor Verbanovich.
Thank you. And just on the question first, and then I'll make a couple comments I forgot to make earlier. In light of the question that Councillor Ioannidis was asking, I'm just wondering from a timing perspective, assuming that we hear from CI on the 19th, it comes to presumably committee and council afterwards, how will that impact our ability? I mean, all of this is contingent on budget, which doesn't get ratified till January. And then after that, I think, is when the grant process starts. I'm wondering if Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chaplin can tell us how this relates to the Tier 2 grants, if that's where the money we're going to end up.
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would generally need to know early to mid-January whether or not that funding is available to be distributed through the Tier 2 grant process.
So, in other words, we'd finish budget, you would know how much is available, and you'd need to know by then.
That's correct, because we'll follow the same process. We'll follow the same timelines in terms of applications. It really is when the decisions start to get made that we need to know how much money is available.
Okay, so it sounds like we'd be fine to hold it in abeyance, make the decision on CEI, and then it either goes to CEI or it goes to our own funds, correct?
From a Tier 2 perspective, that's correct.
Okay, great, thank you. And then just from a comment point of view, two comments actually. One that actually I believe it was Councillor Galloway that made at the region, and then one that I made at the region. One of the things that we may want to look at, and that regional staff were asked to have dialogues with the municipalities on, was would there be any merit in combining all of this? Because right now, each of these organizations are applying for money several times, and it takes work to do each of our grant applications and so on. Can we either coordinate that, or quite frankly, does it simply make sense for us to transfer that tax room from the city to the region and have the region fully fund all of these? And so that's a question that's been put out there to have some discussion on. No decisions, obviously, and there'd have to be dialogue around that, but I just put that out there so that council is aware of that. And then the second one, and this really stood out for me, was that provincially we are not getting our fair share of dollars. And I think we need to work closely with these, what I call foundational organizations, to make sure that we increase our advocacy efforts so that in the future we do get our fair share of dollars into this community when it comes to arts and culture. And that's something that I think we need to continue the dialogue with them after today.
Thank you. Councillor Galway-Seelock.
Yeah, I just didn't get a chance to make comments earlier, so I just wanted to do that. I know that when Mayor Zaire was around this horseshoe, he was always very articulate and able to point out that Kitchener is definitely the leader amongst the regional municipalities in the amount of support it has for the arts. And so that kind of goes to some of your points, Councillor Davey. I don't know beyond the region, but I know Mayor Zaire had a lot of that information and numbers at his fingertips and the percentages. So I know that I can say that we are doing our part definitely from the regional perspective. I think it's important to point out as well that when it came to this mandate of the $1 per capita, that we can be proud of the fact that we followed our commitments all the way through. I think one of the things that I'm anticipating is the refresh of CEI. And I hear what's being said around the horseshoe. And so what I would like to do with number 2, I guess, and number 3, it doesn't really matter, is that we deal with them today, but we deal with them in the perspective that we ask staff to bring back a report in December so that we can actually make the decision on what we move forward with there, whether it is the grant process and we put the $44,000 into that, or whether we agree to look at the CEI, because we'll have had some time then with the refresh mandate to kind of let that digest. And so I believe we have a committee meeting in December, so it still allows us to be informed when we come to final budget on what that decision is. So that's what I would propose, kind of as having moved the recommendations, just a little addition there, so that we kind of can have a little bit more clarity and comfort, because my whole purpose was to hold it into reserve until we could make that decision, and I don't think we can make that decision until we hear from CEI. I have been a supporter of the arts since being on council, because I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't overly involved in the arts prior to being on council, but have definitely grown in appreciation. And I can hear from the pillar organizations that they do need our funding to be a little bit more sustainable, but there's definitely a next level that needs to happen, and we need to assist them in trying to do that. And how we do that, whether it's through funding or through advocacy, we can continue to try and help those organizations to become more sustainable. So having said that, I think that's all I wanted to say. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I have in mind those small to medium-sized arts and culture organizations that may or may not be relying on their relationship with CEI, and our Tier 2 funding applications are due December 4th or so, in the beginning of December. So we need to be clear with those organizations, do we not? This is a question for staff. How are we going to communicate with arts and culture organizations that may be in limbo here, considering the timing of all this influx?
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can speak to the Tier 2 process. We have no intention to change the process at all. It really should, community groups should not be looking at how much money we have to give to decide whether or not they're going to apply or not. If they have a need and it fits the Tier 2 bucket, then they should apply. And then as we go through the decision-making process, a committee of staff and citizens evaluate those, and they'll allocate those funds based on how much we have. So as I responded to the mayor earlier, I think we do not need to know whether, from a Tier 2 perspective. We do not need to know how much money is in that pot until early January.
Okay, so just to follow up then, so arts and culture organizations that might apply to Tier 2 because they qualify and they need the money, would they also then typically have had relationships with CEI applying for additional funding and support?
Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, the quick answer to that is no. CEI was never set up to be a granting organization. It was to provide support for artists and cultural bodies to help them develop their business. So it was not to be dispensing cash.
Right. Okay. But to be given support, and which if it were to be taken away based on the decisions pending about CEI, then those organizations may be in need of additional dollars to complete their mandates. Is that not correct?
Well, I think again, this is the type of thing that I think will be discussed more fully at the November 13th joint meeting of councils. But if it were the case that the type of support CEI was making available to arts organizations was valued by those arts organizations across the board and proving helpful to them, then that would be part of CEI's plan going forward. And I think what you'll see on November 13th is that CEI is looking to be more focused and getting away from that type of support.
Okay, thank you. Looking forward to that report.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Yes, through you, Chair Davey. I'm prepared to support the recommendation, and I think I will support Councillor Galloway's rationale for items number 2 and 3. But overall, I think Mayor Vrbanovic has said it right. I think it's important. Like, we need to advocate heavily with this, just like how we're advocating with two-way go. I think overall, I don't think feds or the province are listening to us. So I think we need to do some serious advocacy.
Thank you. Just for clarification, Councillor Galloway-Seelock, if you could restate the motion.
It's exactly as written, with just the addition for number 2, that staff bring back a report for a decision in our December committee meeting. I don't have the date off the top of my head.
Okay. And Councillor Etherington has requested that items 2 and 3 be voted on separately. And I'll comment briefly. I think I do, my sense, as pointed out by Councillor Galloway-Seelock and Mayor Zaire before us, my sense is that the City of Kitchener is pulling its weight in terms of our funding for arts and culture organizations. A lot of us were disappointed that when we did our sustainability, additional $1 per capita, that those funds were not met by senior levels of government or the private sector, even close to the degree that were targeted. And that's really the disappointing factor in this. But as was said by Mr. Bennett, we stepped up to the plate, and I guess others did not. In decisions in the future, I am going to need some sort of better benchmarks or parameters so I can make this decision on a larger scale. I liken it to our cycling budget, for example. As long as we're comparing ourselves to other municipalities and we're on the top or near the top, I think that's an appropriate level of funding. So I'm going to be looking forward to that at some point in the future. To Councillor Etherington's concern, I've shared his concern about CEI throughout the process, that a lot of them haven't met their projected matching funds. And while I do not see, at this point, having not seen their presentation, I do not anticipate being able to allocate any further dollars towards an organization. I do think there's nothing really to lose by waiting to see what that presentation is in November before allocating these dollars. So I will support the motion as recommended by Councillor Galloway-Seelock. With that, pardon me, I don't think was there a recorded vote called? I don't believe so. No? Okay. So we'll take items 2 and 3 together first. So items 2 and 3, those in favor? And opposed? That carries. And the balance of the report, those in favor? And none are opposed. It's unanimous, yes. Okay, that concludes the first portion of Finance and Corporate Services. We will recess and re-meet at 1 p.m. to discuss natural gas rates. Thank you, everyone.
If I may do so.
Okay, does anyone have any? Okay, so we'll just take that. So that's moving the business plan status report out of information for questions. Those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Galway-Seelock.
Yeah, my one question is with regards to number 34, which is Jack Couch Ballpark Review. And it probably can just be a follow-up answer, but my concern here is that it says it's completed. But I don't remember seeing an overall review for the use of that park. I see here that the key achievements were renovated and were completed and was ready for the home opener, which is great, but what is the long-term vision for that? I thought that that's what that project was. Maybe I misunderstood that. If we can get some sort of clarity on that.
Mr. May.
34, Jack Couch Ballpark Review.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can certainly have Ms. Kugler provide council with a longer explanation. My understanding is that some short-term changes have already been made to that facility. The longer-term vision for the park is not a project that the city is leading. That's being led by the Panthers. We're a key stakeholder at the table, but that's not something that we're driving forward.
Okay, I think that's the piece that I was missing, that we aren't driving that process. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, information items? Not seeing any. Okay. Meeting adjourned.